say it's true. They got a message from the action man. I'm happy, hope you're happy too. I've loved all I've needed love, saw the details fall away. The shrieking when nothing is killing, just pictures of chap girls and synthesis. And I ain't got no money and I ain't got no hands. But I'm hoping to kick with the planet is glowing. Ashes to ash and funk to fuck it. We know Major Tom's a junkie, strung out in heaven's high, hitting an all-time low. Time and again I tell myself I'll stay clean tonight, but the little green wheels are following me. Oh no, not again. I'm stuck with a valuable friend. I'm happy, hope you're happy too.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, September 6, 2017. My name is Sam Seder. This is the four-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. Protests and pleas as Trump administration crushes dreamers. Hurricane Harvey may end up saving us from a debt ceiling crisis. While the West is on fire, Irma is huge, and why Rush Limbaugh tells its audience it's all a hoax. Republicans, meanwhile, are starting to quietly try and quash the Mueller investigation. Democrats make a less than quiet change to anti-monopoly policies, and the UN reports that dozens of chemical attacks have taken place in Syria. White helmets notwithstanding. Senate starts to hold hearings to fix the ACA while it still remains under attack. The clock is ticking. And the trial that starts yesterday, Senator Menendez in New Jersey may be implicated. And Betsy DeVos, on the eve of pulling back on campus rape protections, pulls back on student loan fraud protections. Lastly, Dems launch a super PAC to win back state houses. All this and more on today's program. Just another day of news for us as we catch up from the week gone by. A couple of stories I wanted to talk about that I didn't get to yesterday because obviously so much is going on. And, we went right before we had gone on air yesterday. Jeff Sessions had given a press conference, I guess. I don't know. Would you call it a press conference? It was really more of an announcement. He didn't take any questions. He just sat there sort of gleefully talking about how they were rescinding the executive order that essentially created DACA. And now, I just want to explain this to you, too, because we went through this, and we went through it relatively quickly in terms of Jeff Sessions yesterday. But the argument that the administration is making, and you hear repeated over and over again, is that what the Obama administration did was unconstitutional. This is a total fabrication. Like I say, it's perfectly legal for Donald Trump to announce, or his attorney general to announce, we're just going to reverse this policy. They can do that, but they don't even have the guts to do it. They're couching it in this notion that it was unconstitutional. And let me just very quickly, before we get to what I want to talk about today, make it clear why that's bullcrap. And we touched on it just briefly yesterday. But there is virtually, and why they had to do this before the lawsuit from these 10 states. 10 states had threatened to sue the administration as of like September 5th or something, or 6th or 9th, if they didn't reverse it. Folks like Chris Kobach and I think it's maybe it was Abbott in Texas. I can't remember who the AG is there now. And no one refutes the idea that the administration, or any administration, has the right to set immigration policy in terms of enforcement. Right? There was a change. We have seen a change by the Trump administration in that regard. They no longer prioritize gang members over mothers who have been here for 25 years and have had committed no crimes. They've made that change. None of these attorney generals in these states are threatening to sue the administration over that change. The Obama administration had a document that said, we're going to go specifically after undocumented immigrants who may pose a national security risk. Well, when they do that with limited resources, you are specifically adding, maybe unarticulated or maybe articulated, a class of people who you're not going to go after because you don't have the resources. And that's all the Obama administration did. They simply said, we are going to, this group of people, we are not a priority for us. If you came to this country after or before 2007, you are under the age of 15, you are now under the age of 35, we're not going to go after you. We're going to defer action on you. That's what they're going to do. And then, once action has been deferred and their status has changed, or they are allowed an exception to be in the country at least temporarily, the Attorney General, both by regulation from 1981 and by federal statute from 1986, is allowed to provide them temporary work permission. So when you look at DACA, it's not one, it is really a group of regulations that emanate from the president's more or less prosecutorial power, if you want to call it that, discretion, And the laws emanate from that. So the idea that this is unconstitutional is absurd. It's absurd on its face. It's not only not unconstitutional, it's not contrary to statute. But they will say this because, and we've had listeners on this program who have called in the fun half. I'm not going to name any names, Doug. But claiming to be constitutional conservatives. And so the administration knows they can just say the word Constitution and it gets people to jump. It's really a substitute for white supremacy more often than not. So I just want to make that absolutely clear. As and then there were other lies that that Sessions gleefully passed on. But that's the foundational argument that this is unconstitutional. And then after that, it's just about politics. And so basically what you have is not that the Trump administration's hand was forced, not that they were remedying some unconstitutional breach. In fact, I think Jeff Sessions, unless there is a new directive from the Office of Legal Counsel in the Department of Justice, his own Department of Justice said it was not unconstitutional. This is just a policy decision. So now it's in the hands of Congress. And what will Congress do? Well, here is Morning Joe.
It had nothing to do with getting us here.
Right. As a member of Newt Gingrich's Reagan Revolution crew.
Contract with America. Was that a friendly document towards immigrant communities?
Or I would say nothing in terms of espousing. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Scarborough's Country. That was the name of the show.
They literally don't even know that was his first show. That was the name
of the show on MSNBC. And I got news for you. It was slightly different than the country he lives in now, where 3 of the primetime shows are not him and Pat Buchanan and Jerry Nachman, but instead the highest rated shows on cable television, which are liberal leaning. That's how old I am. So I'm old. And here he is, Joe Scarborough, just shocked that somehow today's Republican Party, I mean, I don't know where he was in 2005 when Karl Rove thought this was the way that the Republicans were going to get the majority, so they were pushing for immigration reform, and the Republican Party just lost it. The idea that they would do, in fact, this entire movement was as much about immigration as anything else. But here he seems to be completely shocked that Paul Ryan can't find the votes.
That's the problem, Congressman. They do not have the votes. They need a president to help them get the votes. They can't do it on their own. They don't have it.
You don't think they have the votes?
No, on nothing.
Oh my God! On DACA, you don't think they've got 51 votes?
Only if they in the House, they'd have to get a lot of Democratic votes.
They're going to get. You don't think they're going to get? They're going to get every Democratic vote.
Yeah, but
they're going to get every Democratic vote.
Democrats are going to ask for something in return.
Well, then you know what you do?
You give it to them.
You give it to them. You know why? Because that's how our founding fathers saw the Constitution of the United States. There's give and take. Casey. Every Democrat would vote for this. This is not rocket science. You start with 48 votes in the United States Senate for Dreamer legislation. I can already name you 4 senators that are on board there. You start with every member of Nancy Pelosi's caucus. This is not hard.
Yeah, but, for Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, they'd still rather be with the president than with Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer. It's as simple as that.
Well, but if they're not, listen, if they're not smart enough to be able to pass this and say, I'm not with Nancy Pelosi, I'm with 75% of the American people, then they really don't deserve to be in their position. They should just go into a dark basement in Janesville and tweet for the rest of their life. This is not hard.
Yeah. Apparently, it is a lot harder for the Republicans. Can't imagine where that came from. It's amazing how much Donald Trump has changed, isn't it, over the past? He used to be on the joke.
He was in on the joke. He would say things like Mexicans are rapists with sort of a Don Wrinkles twinkle in his eye.
Yeah,
and he used to end all of his bits with, we all need to love each other.
That's right. That's right. His racism and misogyny always came with a wink. Now, not so much.
It's the way sort of Stern would play on stereotypes, but really was kind of subtly undermining them. That was what Trump used to do in his earlier work.
Indeed. So, folks, as announced on this program yesterday, this is Kelly's final week. And, of course, then she took 2 days off. And she's coming back on Friday for her final day.
It's in style.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way you do it. And so you know what that means. I have had to log into ZipRecruiter, folks. And I had to be totally honest, I haven't posted the job yet because I'm still sort of figuring out what we're looking for. But do you know where to post the job to find the best candidates? I do. ZipRecruiter. Finding great talent can be tough, believe me. Believe me as I look around. Believe me. Thankfully, with ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to 100-plus job sites with just one click. Then their powerful technology efficiently matches the right people to your job better than anyone else. That's why ZipRecruiter is different. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them. In fact, 80% of employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a qualified candidate in just 24 hours. No juggling emails or calls to your office. This is the thing I'm psyched about. With all due respect, I don't want people calling me. Simply screen, rate, and manage candidates all in one place with ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use dashboard. Find out today. I'm going to find out later this afternoon why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. And right now, my listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, for free. And I got news for you. It's not just our listeners. This is great. This is super exciting for me. As soon as I find somebody new on ZipRecruiter,
came in this morning.
I'm just going to fire each one of you guys one by one to do this again. Go to
very,
ZipRecruiter.
Very pro-labor programming. It's very good.
Well, it's not so much. I mean, I will be hiring other labor. It's just that...
I think joking about firing people and taking away their livelihoods is very in line with the politics you espouse. Very good. It's very in line. Smart.
Well, I'm glad to know that you think you're getting a livelihood here. ZipRecruiter.com/majority.
Also very good. You woefully underpay us. Very in line with your values.
ZipRecruiter.com.
Then you laugh about it.
/majority. ZipRecruiter.com/majority. One more time. Try it for free. Go to ZipRecruiter.com/majority. And as you know, today is Wednesday, which means that it is Blue Apron Day at the Seder household. I'm starting to think we should start it on Tuesdays, but we'll see. Once we get back into school, we get Blue Apron delivered to our place on Wednesdays. We have it Wednesday or Thursday, or sometimes we'll do like Wednesday and Friday. We could even do it Wednesday and Saturday. But I mean, you can get it any day for as many days as you want, but because we don't want to order in all the time, we don't always have time to make, and we don't have the imagination, with all due respect to us. School starting up again, schedule's getting a little tighter, cooking becomes less of a priority. But for less than $10 a meal, Blue Apron makes it easy to create delicious seasonal recipes. They give you step-by-step instructions. They give you pre-portioned ingredients delivered right to your door so you don't have waste, which drives me nuts. You don't even have to go to the grocery store. Some of the meals available in September include, oh, this is going to drive me crazy, summer vegetable and egg paninis with Calabrian chili mayonnaise and caprese salad. You ready for this? Soy glazed pork and rice cakes with bok choy and marinated green beans. Skillet vegetable chili with cornmeal and cheddar drop biscuits. Garlic butter shrimp and corn with green bean salad and roasted purple tomatoes. Right?
That sounds incredible.
And, you know, we have a stack of all these menus. I mean, not menus, recipes.
Oh, really?
You create your own recipe book. I wonder what would happen if I was actually to market that. It's just like the Majority Report recipe book. Each meal comes with a step-by-step, easy-to-follow recipe card. There you go. I mean, you could wait until I publish it all under the Majority Report banner, or you could just do this now.
Or you could wait.
And the best part is you get proportioned ingredients. Every meal can be prepared in 40 minutes or less. You could check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free. Why would you not do this with free shipping? By going to blueapron.com/majority. Blueapron.com/majority. Check it out. Blue Apron. It's a better way to cook. All right, so in that last clip, we had Morning Joe talk about how this should be easy to get a statutory version of DACA, of the Dreamers Act. And the reason why he says it should be easy is because he said you already start with 49 Democratic votes in the Senate. And you have, whatever it is, the entire Democratic caucus. What is that, 214 votes in the House. Now, this is important to note because it's important to note, A, because it's true, but B, because it is the theme that I'm pushing today, which is 194. Sorry. And all you need is, 214 or 216 to get the majority, 214 to get the majority. So you need about 20 Republicans. But the fact that you have a completely unified Democratic caucus on this question of DACA is super significant because it indicates I don't want to say dramatic, but a definitive change in the Democratic Party. In 2010, the House, Democratic House, passed a DREAM Act, which would have allowed undocumented immigrants to apply for citizenship if they entered the United States as children. DACA doesn't go that far. This would have gone further. If you had entered as a child without documentation and graduated from high school or had an equivalent degree, and you'd been in the U.S. for at least 5 years, so in 2010 it would have gone back to 2005, you had 5 Democrats in the Senate. 5 Democrats in the Senate who voted against this.
Are they all gone, or is Tester voted against it?
Tester voted against it. The rest of the 5 are gone. Joe Manchin wasn't there for the vote.
Oh, he skipped it.
He skipped it. He said he would have opposed the bill, but he skipped it. So who knows?
And also, I watched his interview with Jank, and I found his position on this literally indecipherable.
Well, that's the point. The Democratic Party has moved. He's gone from supposedly explicit to now, I'm really going to be vague about it.
Deeper than vague.
Yeah. But John Tester, in 2010, said that illegal immigration is a critical problem facing our country, but amnesty is not the solution. I do not support legislation that provides a path to citizenship for anyone in this country illegally. In fact, I remember this distinctly because Marcus Mulitzes, who had championed John Tester in the primary, when he ran in the primary, I guess maybe it was in 2006, maybe, off the top of my head, against the DLC. Marcos had made a big issue of this is going to be the first nail, if not the final nail, in the DLC coffin. And he sunk the DLC in that race. But when Tester voted against this, Marcos said, I'm done with you. Yesterday, John Tester said, America's immigration system is badly broken and needs fixing, but breaking a promise to these children who are here through no fault of their own is not the solution. Congress must work together, Democrats and Republicans, to secure our borders, crack down on folks illegally entering our country, and provide a way forward for innocent kids. So he's moved on this. I'm not saying send the guy a cookie, because to be against this, to me, is just beyond, like I said yesterday, it's sadistic.
Sadistic, racist, and strategic in terms of the sort of implications, I think, of who votes.
Right.
know.
And folks, make no mistake of what I'm saying. I'm not saying that any of these people were good people then or are good people now. I don't care. And I don't care if in their hearts of hearts they care about you. Politicians are not your mommy and daddy. Politicians are tools. And how a tool is used is a function of who grips that tool. Hope this is not getting weird.
And how, a tool of our side.
How the tool gripper uses it. No, I remember on the old Majority Report, Bishop Tutu came on the program, and we were talking about religion. And he said, it's like a knife. You can cut butter. It can also get stuck in your chest.
Oh, wow. Sam Harris, I'm sure, would have some really important correctives on that.
Right.
Yeah. He would know better.
Senator Joe Donnelly voted against the DREAM Act as a House member in 2010. But he is supportive of it today as a senator. Claire McCaskill voted against the 2007 version of the DREAM Act. But then she voted for the 2010 version. You had Bernie Sanders voted against an 2007 version. Because Labor was also very much against that, worried about, and to be fair here, there was a guest worker program that would have created a class of workers who could have very easily been exploited and underpaid and would have arguably made it much tougher on particularly some unions. But you've got unions now who are rallying against this. Rallying for this, for, a legislative fix. The coalition has changed. There was an interesting stat in a Washington Post piece. 3 in 4 Democrats were white 25 years ago. Now, just 57%. This is, I believe, this is in Congress. The conservative Democrats, particularly white people in the South, are now Republicans. So you've had a big change in the Democratic Party in this regard. And it's moved quickly. Part of it explains some of the campaign strategy of the Clinton campaign. Certainly was reflected in what we saw with nascent ideas of this in the 2008 Obama campaign. But over the past 7 years, there's been a big change in the Democratic Party. And the Republican Party is going to feel a lot of pressure, or should. And like Joe Scarborough was just amazed by it. They're going to feel pressure. But at the end of the day, they know where their bread is buttered. And it's buttered at the racist milking and churning station.
The most I read, I
turning into Thomas Friedman today.
You are.
Yeah,
Is
no,
there-
a cab
you
driver
got any-
told
yeah,
me
I was
all
gonna
this on
say,
the way in.
You lost the cab driver anecdote.
My pedicab driver.
But the other the thing with
that I
Friedman
take every
though
day
is
to
you'd
work.
have to you'd have to like mismatch a metaphor as well. It'd have to be like the butter that we churned out while we waited in line for a JetBlue flight or something. Like,
Well,
have to
it
be
was
like
actually
the wrong
Uber
place.
of racist butter.
It was the Uber of racist butter in a transformed global economy where we don't just trade, we actually synchronize every second.
Now, so we had this argument earlier from Jeff Sessions and much of the Republican Party that we have to get rid of DACA because it's unconstitutional. For a lot of Republicans, the next question is, okay, so, in other words, the president will sign a legislative version of the DREAM Act. A Republican lawmaker, you'll vote for a statutory DREAM Act? Oh, no, actually, we won't. We were just saying the unconstitutional thing, so we didn't have to address the fact that we're full-on bigots. To his credit, Steve King, who I think probably takes a certain amount of pride in his bigotry, at least has come up with something more creative. Don't you understand that while it is sadistic and cruel to take people who grew up in this country, many of them not even realizing maybe that they were undocumented? You think it's cruel because you're a normal human being, but when you're Steve King and your mind operates like a computerized chess game, you're seeing that what might be sadistic to these people is actually benevolent to the rest of the world. Here he is on Breitbart Radio.
Another tweet you sent out this morning is former DACA in DACA apostrophe S DACA recipients will make great Peace Corps volunteers in their home countries. None would take more hardship or risk than we ask of the Peace Corps. Can you explain that tweet?
Well, yes. I mean, people are saying, well, you send these poor DACA kids back to a country that they never knew, and the language they don't speak, a place where they don't have any connections whatsoever. That's not true. That's how they paint it. They say, these are valedictorians. They're the salt of the earth. They're all good people, and they're the cream of the crop. And some of them do fit that category, but there's a lot of them
I'm sure
that don't.
some of them are
And
nice.
So I'm making this point that if we shut off the DACA program, and there are 800,000 of them in the United States today, they would deploy, and I use that word that way, back to their home territories most likely. And they would go back there with a U.S. taxpayer-funded education. Many of them are college education. They would have top-notch English skills. They would understand how a free enterprise economy works, how a generally corrupt-free society, first world, works. They would have seen the transportation systems we have, the educational system, the research and development systems that we have, how civilized people interact with each other. All of that would go with them back to their home countries.
Pause it. I just want to, and you can dial it back. I just want you to play that how a civilized people interacts with each other. Well, I don't know where he thinks these people are from. I don't know. Maybe like we're sending back, like people who were raised by wolves or in caves or something. But how a civilized people interact with each other. Incidentally, and of course the irony is we're taking these people and deporting them out of the country because that's the civilized thing to do. But here we go.
U.S. taxpayer-funded education. Many of them are college education. They would have top-notch English skills. They would understand how a free enterprise economy works, how a generally corrupt-free society, first world, works. They would have seen the transportation systems we have, the educational system, the research and development systems that we have, how civilized people interact with each other. All of that would go with them back to their home countries. And wouldn't that be the best economic and cultural development, a civilizational development that, say, Mexico could ever experience? Be to get, if these are their best and brightest, some of them are, but just give it to the people that advertise DACA, and what if their words are right? Send them back home again. It'll have far more impact than you'll get out of Peace Corps volunteers.
Well, I mean, if that's really the agenda, let's just send randomly the graduating class of, let's say, all the Ivy League schools. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I think we already basically have. Those are the people that run places like Mexico, which is why they have so many problems. But I get your point.
Send them back. Send hundreds of thousands of them.
Okay, yeah. Just not the ones that went to the Kennedy School.
Right.
That is also, I mean, and I know you have the stat, but there's the enormous racism and obvious and not even subtext that, I mean, he mentioned Mexico specifically, but some of these places that people are going to get sent back to are quote unquote first or second world countries, like in South Korea,
right?
The Philippines. I mean, it's a second world.
Tens
Poland,
of thousands of them. I mean, I think certainly the majority of the folks
will be Latin America.
Will be from Latin America,
which is of course what he's really talking about.
3,000 from Poland. 5,000 from India, 15,000 from South Korea, 8,000 from the Philippines, 6,000 from Jamaica. The vast majority are going to go back to Central America.
Also, I don't think that anybody...
Not even go back. I mean, well, I guess go back, but, you're talking about after a long time. But, I mean, he doesn't, the idea, I mean, just how depraved and psychotic to justify this stuff, it really is just stunning.
He's a racist sociopath, but I think that I understand the obvious reason why we pick examples when we talk about something like DACA of somebody who is, say, a valedictorian or has done everything right. But at some point, like I actually think, there's a bigger point. Like you shouldn't have to be an extraordinary achiever for this program to cover you. And I actually think it's interesting that in his despicable way, he's identifying a weakness with those sort of arguments, that we identify like this extraordinary, exceptional example, when really it's like, hey, maybe he's just a normal kid who got some B's and some C's, and maybe he's like, I don't know, not going to set the world on fire, but they were raised here. They're a good person, and it's disgusting to send them back to a place they don't know. It's a human rights abuse, regardless of who they are and how they did in school.
I mean, I understand rhetorically why this is done. Yeah, and I think, yesterday we got a call from Ron Reagan, who's an immigration lawyer, who doesn't like even the framing of were brought here by no fault of their own.
Right.
As if their parents, who are responding to the fact that economic opportunity has been swallowed up in Central America, or they're afraid of getting murdered in the murder capital of the world.
All due to our policies in many respects.
Yes, of NAFTA, where an ear of corn in Mexico grown in Mexico is twice as expensive as one that is grown in the United States. I mean, all of those things, or even as if it's really that bad of an issue, like they're coming here to do something wrong. They're infecting us by their presence. All of those framings are problematic.
They're infecting us by their presence. Right. That's what they're saying.
Of course. Let me just add, and I would add too that, you see statistics like 1/3 less likely to commit crimes than native-born Americans. 92% employed, which is a pretty impressive number for when you talk about average age of 26. All of this, yes, these things are cited as some way of basically trying to convince bigots that your bigotry is irrational. I don't know if that works, frankly. I think what it does is it increases the self-righteousness of, folks like, the Joe Scarboroughs of the world. And it makes it a little bit easier maybe to create a narrative. So there's probably rhetorical value in it. But yes, largely
But I think
speaking,
it's like
of
everything
course,
else. It's the whole kind of means
Well, this
testing
is the same-
culture. It undermines the broader argument that everybody just should have basic guarantees and rights. And
we see this with Muslim Americans too, who are like,
yeah, exactly.
they fought in the, this guy, was in the military. He's earned his American citizenship. Well, no, if you're Muslim and you're an American citizen, you don't have to earn your citizenship any more than anybody else does, because nobody does.
Right. Yeah. I think also I liked that what Hayes tweeted the other day, which is he said that if you've ever driven under the influence of anything, you've committed a more dangerous illegal action than anybody who crossed the border.
Drugs, and not illegal drugs, but if you've bought drugs from Canada, if you're a senior citizen and you have gotten drugs from Canada via the internet, you have committed a more serious crime.
Right.
Much more serious. It's a civil violation to enter into this country without documentation. And the vast majority, particularly of this subset of immigrants, only came in once, which means that they didn't, if you get deported and come back, it becomes a more, I don't know that it's a felony, but it becomes more criminal.
Did you know that when Joe Scarborough was in Congress, he introduced a bill to eliminate the United States' relationship with the UN? There would be a transitionary period, and then we wouldn't do things with the UN anymore.
He's an internationalist.
He's a really moderate.
One other point I wanted to make that took place over, or that was manifested over the past, over the last week. And Dave Weigel, writing for the CIA, had a piece that about what's happening in the Democratic Party over the issue of antitrust, or as he calls it, anti-monopoly. Now, if you've been listening to this program for the past year and change, maybe I guess now, gosh, year and a half, 2 years, you know that one of the things that we were talking about, and one of the things we were anticipating with the election of Hillary Clinton, was the ascendance of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren in the Senate, and the agenda of antitrust or anti-monopoly rising. We've had a number of guests since the election.
One was before. Barry Lynn
two were actually before. Lena Khan we had in 2014, when these themes were starting to develop. There was an initiative at the, is it New America Foundation?
New America Foundation.
And run by this guy, Barry Lynn, called the Open Markets Initiative. And we had Barry Lynn on in October, the last week of October, in anticipation of this big push by folks within the Democratic Party to push for a return to the antitrust positions that we had during much of the 20th century, which was that large corporations, when they get too large, when they create monopolies, are fundamentally anti-democratic. That not only can they distort prices and services for consumers, but they infringe upon the development of rivals. They infringe upon the freedoms that we have in a society. That they are toxic to a democracy in a multitude of ways. In the late 70s, early 80s, the Chicago School, Chicago University, University of Chicago, School of Thought, led by Robert Bork, pushed that monopolies are only bad and we should exercise antitrust law only as a function of consumer welfare. So in other words, if a huge company can provide cheaper prices than two smaller companies or three smaller companies or four smaller companies or five smaller companies, then we should not restrict it with antitrust laws, with no regard of the power that company will have in terms of public policy, with no regard as to the power that that company has in stifling innovation, with no regard as to that power that company has to stifle competition and the value of competition, and frankly, with only a short-sighted notion of what constitutes consumer welfare. And under Reagan and subsequent to that, certainly within as recently as the Obama administration telling its Federal Trade Commission to not worry about Google, Facebook, even Microsoft was left on the table when George Bush came in. The DOJ was looking at Microsoft back then. We have had a diminishing, I guess, and a shrinking notion of what antitrust enforcement should be. And you can go back, you can listen to the Barry Lynn interview that we did in October 25th of 2016. You can search for, if you are, particularly if you're a member and you're on the app, or if you're using our app, you can look for Lena Khan back in 2014. Not directly having to do with antitrust, but basically taking on the issue of Amazon. You can listen to, in June of this year, K. Sabil Rahman, Democracy Against Domination. Similarly, about antitrust and anti-monopoly, you can listen to Matt Stoller in July of this past year. And all of this blew out into the open over the week we were off when Barry Lynn was fired and Open Markets was jettisoned from the New America Foundation. Now, look, there's a lot of controversy around this narrative. But broadly speaking, it appears that because New America Foundation got most of its funding, huge amount of its funding, from Eric Schmidt of Google, it created internal tensions over the years. And as open markets and this idea of anti-monopoly became more and more mainstreamed into democratic ideas, in June of last year, 2016, Elizabeth Warren gave a big speech at an open markets conference. So the tension was mounting internally. And there's a lot of dynamics about think tanks that I won't bore you with. But the tension was mounting when Google was fined by the EU by, I think it was $2.6 billion. This happened a couple of months ago. Barry Lynn wrote an op-ed congratulating EU regulators. And it appears like this was the final straw. It's unclear how much pressure was there. It's unclear how much pressure you need. If you're a think tank, I mean, look, I got news for you folks. If I'm getting $25 million from, the button-down collar shirt business, it's one thing for Michael to come in dressed like he's, it's Sunday morning. He's just going outside to get the paper on his stoop, wearing his Tony
slippers. Soprano tracksuit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But if he starts articulating that collared shirts are bad.
Yeah, particularly on you.
I'm just in general. I don't need to hear from the guy who's giving me $25 million to support collared shirts. I'm like, hey, dude, I'm going to expect that he's not going to like that, or she, the promoter of college shares, and I'm going to be like, you know what? Maybe it's time.
Warren's coming to our next conference. Sorry.
Cut it. Knock it off. And that's the part where you see, the power of these entities. Now, of course, Eric Schmidt doesn't have to give money to New America Foundation and whatnot, but for him, it's like he's got billions because of an outfit like Google. And so new markets, or I should say open markets, spun off. And they have launched a new project and site, Citizens Against Monopoly. And it's interesting. Like I said, Dave Weigel wrote about this and noted the change in the Democratic Party, because this made it part of, the marginally better deal. The best part of that marginally better deal was the adoption of anti-monopoly rhetoric and disposition. We also saw this even in Al Franken's and others' grilling of Gorsuch during the Supreme Court fight. You're quashing the little guy. It's interesting. Anne Marie Slaughter, the head of the New America Foundation, in writing more about what led to Barry Lynd's dismissal, wrote this. Barry's new organization and campaign against Google is the opening salvo. And from her perspective, I think part of what happened here was there was this tension. It became essentially untenable. And Barry Lynn and his group used this tension as a way of moving this issue to the forefront. And she wrote in a Medium post, Barry's new organization campaign against Google is the opening salvo of one group of Democrats versus another group of Democrats in the run-up to the 2020 election. I personally think the country faces far greater challenges of racism, violence, a broken political system, and geographic and partisan divisions so great that we're losing any common sense of what we stand and strive for as a country. Now, it's fascinating. There's a couple of things that's fascinating about this statement to me. All right, put aside whether or not, all the stuff with New America Foundation. What's fascinating about this is the idea that, open markets actually wrote quite a bit about the problems of monopolies and what it does in terms of black and brown-owned businesses. But the idea of a broken political system is both a function of antitrust and anti-monopoly and also provides less enforcement. You want to lessen geographic and partisan divisions? Antitrust policy or anti-monopoly policy is a great way to do it. There was some polling done. In April of 2016, Hart Research Associates conducted polling. It surveyed 1,100 voters, 341 from the decisive Rust Belt states, and found just a slim majority saying Democrats favored, quote, average Americans over large corporations and banks. The polling found corporate monopolies viewed negatively by 66% of all voters and 70% of Rust Belt voters. The words corporate monopolies. What's interesting is just 21% of Rust Belt voters, however, favored antitrust laws, which means that that's probably an antiquated phrase. But in other words, if you want to reach across partisan and geographic divides, running against corporate monopolies and actually implementing and executing an agenda against corporate monopolies is a great place to start. So this is something to keep an eye on. And also be clear here. You know, this is not socialist policy. This is well within your mainstream capitalism. It's just we have veered away from that.
Well, we haven't had that kind of mainstream capitalism for decades.
Well,
I mean, yes,
true.
It's a question,
That's true.
No, but it's absolutely not socialistic. But I just want to highlight. I think, you know, this deployment of, regardless of the specifics, but Anne-Marie Slaughter, and it goes back. You know, when Hillary Clinton said to Bernie in one of those debates, he went on one of his Wall Street rants, and she said, you know, Wall Street won't solve racism. I mean, it was breathtakingly disingenuous because of how actually Wall Street abuse does,
regulating Wall Street won't.
Regulating Wall Street will not solve racism, and of course, it's totally disingenuous because Wall Street run amok does disproportionately affect people of color.
But even if it doesn't,
that's exactly. It's an insane. But I'm saying that even the phraseology, like this, Democrats that don't want to rein in corporate power are going to. The new ballywick is to disingenuously exploit really important social justice and racial issues, and that's all over that Slaughter statement. It's like we don't have time to deal with corporate monopolies and inequality because Trump is president. Essentially, is what she's saying. And I mean, it's just going to show up everywhere. That's going to be the kind of tactic
the fact
of
the
that
matter
pseudo-woke
is, while
center.
Trump is president, we're not going to do anything about
Anything.
monopolies, but we're not going to do anything about anything. The question is, from a rhetorical standpoint, what's going to get you elected? And this would certainly help.
Oh, certainly, but I don't. I mean, clearly there's some cross purposes there with some of these people. Just even with look at the funding question.
It is the functional equivalent of Jeff Sessions going up there and saying, the reason why we're rolling back DACA is because of constitutional reasons, as opposed to we're rolling back DACA because we don't want brown people in our country. And when whomever, Anne-Marie Slaughter or whomever it is, says, the reason why we don't want to deal with monopolies is because we've got racism, it's also just as disingenuous. I got news for you. You can do both. And not only can you do both, even if they were mutually exclusive, they're not mutually exclusive. So
they're actually synchronized.
But this is a growing movement within the Democratic Party, and you know the reality is that at least in terms of the public's imagination, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have as much power as, well, certainly the Anne-Marie Slaughters. I mean, but the question is you know how much does this catch on amongst Democratic voters, Democrat Party at large. But all right, well, that's it for today, folks. Those are the two big things I want to talk about that are relevant and how we're relevant next week. We'll come back with a guest tomorrow, right, Michael?
Yeah, potentially.
And then on Friday, just a little house cleaning. We're going to be starting early, as early as 11 a.m. on the East Coast time. Maybe in a moment or two earlier than that.
I thought you were aiming for 10 of 11.
Well, 10 of 11. I don't want it
It's
to.
a kind of rando time.
Well, you know, it's Kelly's last day on Friday.
Yes.
But we got to end by 2 on that day. Folks,
Goodbye.
It is your support that makes this show possible. And you can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. And just a reminder, commercials bothering you? We had 2 today. If you don't want to hear commercials, the best way to do that is become a member. You want extra material? Best way to do that is to become a member. Want to make sure this show is here day in, day out? Best way to do that, become a member. We're going to be rolling out a new website soon. We're going to be updating the app soon. We're talking about getting, hopefully, it's scary to upgrade some equipment sometimes, just because it's a big expense. But we may get a little bit nicer board. I'm not sure exactly what that's, if people will know that, but
I think they'll be able to hear it.
Do you think so? It's possible.
I think so.
All that and more, folks. So become a member today. Go to jointhemajorityreport.com. And as always, if you don't have the financial resources, but you want the extra content, please send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. We'll hook you up. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. And if you buy crap from Amazon or you buy stuff from jet.com, at the very least, do it through our link at majorityreportkickback.com. We get a kickback. We'll be right back. 646-257-3920.
Think of all the times she said no, 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 no. Like to speak my mind. She said no, 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 no. And I know her time's not free. She didn't waste none on me. Situation sad. She said no, 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 no. Things are looking bad. She said no, 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 no. And if it was up to me, I'd tell her a thing or three. Every time I see her look my way, I don't know, girl, what to say. Situation sad. She said no, 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 no. Things are looking bad. She said no, 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 no. And if it was up to me, I'd tell her a thing or three. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because this is the fun half. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the famous fun half. What is that? What's sounding so airy? Am I getting, what am I picking up there?
Oh, sorry.
What are you doing? Just playing random,
I'm using Michael's old mute button, and it's a bit airy.
Plays like 3 different tracks at the same time, and he goes, I'm adjusting the sound levels.
Let's go to the, well, if we get that upgrade in the mixer, that is gone. That'll be gonzo.
You guys have been talking about a new mixer for a while.
Well, it takes me a long time before I do that. Let's go to the phones. You're calling from 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello, this is Josh from Chicago.
Hello, Josh from Chicago. How are you?
I'm good. I'm grooving to the music that's playing on the phone right now.
Oh, all right. There you go. Matt has turned that down, and I'm sorry that you have to end your grooving.
Oh, Matt, keep it going. I was grooving.
Do you want me to put you back on hold, or what's the story?
No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, Sam,
Yes.
it's good that you're back. You're looking very tan.
Oh, thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. We've changed the lighting.
And I missed your rants about Social Security.
Well,
But,
I'm sure we'll come back around when the report is released.
Anyways, so yesterday, actually, there were several, about 15 DACA people. I think it was 13 or 14 DACA people were arrested at Trump Tower in a protest, protesting, and they were all released. But I think in total about 20 people were arrested in protesting. And thankfully they were released and not being charged. But calling about the DACA situation, is someone who has a friend who is not in a state, who is part of DACA, who is not in a state that's going to be protected. Yeah, I think in New York and California and these sort of more liberal states, there's sort of I think they'll be protected, but in state like, let's say, in the Midwest, it's going to be harder. It's very scary.
I think it's still scary in New York and California. I mean, they're going to have to figure out a way of doing this, right? I mean, because, look, the bottom line is the federal government has all their information. And they said in their statement they will not proactively give this information to ICE. But the fact is that ICE just needs to say, give us the information, and then they'll give them the information.
Yeah, and that's why the people who were arrested last night didn't give any information.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary.
Yeah, and there was a study that was shown recently that said we would lose $400 billion in GDP if we ended DACA. And for me, especially watching the Jeff Sessions press conference, to me this is and I think it's so thinly veiled, masked as white supremacy. Them clinging on to this last vision of white supremacy. There's no good reason to end this program, which is a bare bones program at best. I know from my friends in DACA, they don't have access to benefits,
no
at least
benefits,
depending on what state you're in.
They
don't have access.
They don't even vest.
They
don't even vest. My understanding is they don't even vest in Social Security for 10 years. They pay in.
No.
They pay in.
They pay in.
But they don't. They're
taxed.
And so, which means that, I mean, if they, for whatever reason, were to pay in for 8 years and leave, they would not vest, unlike an American citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, none of them none of them could even possibly draw on this for another 30 years. Or I guess, if they were to get injured, let's say 3 years out and they've been paying in, or they get injured 8 years out and have been paying in for 8 years, they wouldn't get anything. So it's a not only are they not getting handouts, they are getting a sort of screwed in terms of
they are.
And certainly probably based upon what they would have thought that they would have gotten when they were 10 or 12 or 14, when I bet a lot of them thought they were American citizens. It's that much harder.
Yeah, and I can speak to my friend, one of my friends who's in DACA. He didn't actually know he wasn't an American citizen until he tried to get a driver's license.
Right,
he couldn't do it, and he just had no idea because he's been here since he was 4. To him, he's not from he's from Mexico. He's not from Mexico. He's he knows one country, and it's America. And basically, America is profiting off this DACA system. They're profiting off these immigrants because these immigrants are putting money into our economy. They are contributing to our economy, but they don't get any of the benefits that we get. They aren't going to get any of those benefits. So I think it's very important for people to understand how bare bones this DACA program is actually, and B even though it's very important we keep it, like it's still almost exploiting some of these people in a way. Just 'cause they aren't going to get the benefits.
Of course it is.
They aren't going to reap benefits.
Of course it is. Appreciate the call, man.
Yep.
Right. Totally exploitive. Calling from a 610 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Mike.
Hey, Mike. How are you?
From Pennsylvania.
Hey, Mike.
Good. Hey, Mike.
Wait, I was trying to do something else there. I failed.
I know you're trying to.
You know, anytime I wear any plays, I'll fucking lay you out. Yeah, that's John from San Antonio. you messed up, man. It's very hard to know who to trust, I have to say. In a Mike versus John from San Antonio. You guys are both very, 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 very astute analysts. So it's sort of, I hope, John, I hope for my own emotional state that you're totally wrong.
Well, here's the thing. I'm not saying about, to talk about this for 5 seconds. I'm not saying that the Democrats can't win in any universe. I'm saying that you need to modulate your expectations. If you're sitting back going, well, Trump's really unpopular, the Dems are going to have a wave.
How about this? I'll kick your fucking ass in any universe. How about that?
Yeah, exactly. But what I wanted to talk to you guys about was to push back against that pseudo-woke, if we regulate Wall Street, then we won't fix racism. And I actually, if the evidence is in, there's just a new report. This is kind of wonky, but it's from the Center for Economic Policy Research. And they say that the number one way to eliminate the racial and gender wage gap is union representation. In fact, there is no gender gap at all between black women and black men if they're members of unions.
Wow.
So putting class first actually starts to reduce both the wage and gender gap. If you're in a union, you're pretty sure you're being paid the same as a man doing the same job because you have collective bargaining. It's not that difficult. And so the one issue where these Silicon Valley and these Wall Street guys are all together to do is oppose labor and union organizing, which is the only proven way to solve the problems they say they care about. And so, there is no centrist alternative for feminism. It isn't, that's just bullshit. And I think they know it.
I think they know it too. And look, open markets had been doing their work, I think, for almost a decade. I'm not sure how long it's been, but pretty close. And, the idea was like, Schmidt's been given money, Google's been given money, they never bothered them. Well, and I think part of it is like you can just see the difference. In the past 2 years, the amount of anti-monopoly, I'm going to do my best here, not to say antitrust, because people don't know what that means. I've come to understand. Yeah. But anti-monopoly talk within the Democratic Party has grown exponentially. And, I think they're afraid. I think they're a little bit afraid of it because, look, it's very hard when people are indebted to corporate money, when people are indebted to YouTube clicks, when people are indebted to whatever it is. I mean, the smartest thing I feel like I've ever done with this business that we have here is I have so many bosses that not any one of them can fire me. And honestly, like, that's the best thing about this funding model for me. It's just like somebody sends me an email and says, I don't want you talking about this. I'm like, all right, you can fire me. There goes you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Fuck you forever. That should be the new send-off email for people.
That's going to be our automatic reply. But, so, yeah, it's, this is going to be a big fight. I mean, this is going to be a big fight. And I think like I mean, I need to spend a little more time thinking about it, but I think the key is going to be having people who are leading these arguments, making sure they are building the relationships that are necessary within the various communities that make up the constituencies of the Democratic Party. I mean, because
Right.
I don't think, like, look, Anne Marie is not writing on Medium to in any way influence the perspective of really any Democratic voters, right? Because, nobody's, I mean, when you start cross-referencing the people who know New America Foundation, know about open markets, know about Anne Marie Slaughter, know about Medium as a place where you post things, find that you're talking about literally just a handful of people. But there is an attempt to create this false dichotomy, this false choice, so that when you're talking to leaders of communities, whether it's the African American community, whether it's young people's communities, whether it's Latino communities, whether it's communities of women, they want that message to filter to them because those are the people they're trying to reach. And so it's really incumbent upon us. And, that's why I, am talking about it because, on this show, we have people who are within sort of the general population, but there's also a decent amount of people who listen to this program who are in leadership positions. They are leaders of groups. They're in the leadership of groups, of different organizing groups and of communities and whatnot. And it's really important for people to understand this dynamic and understand that, when you look at an outfit like Open Markets or or just as an example, that it's not, there's no argument at all that that in any way diminishes the need that we have for things like immigration reform or anything that's pushing back on the idea of white supremacy and the way that it's practiced in our country. It's these are different mechanisms, particularly in an era where we're more enlightened, where these can help everyone and just because there's a certain universality to it does not mean it diminishes the impact or the focus on these other communities.
I think the universality, Sam, actually enhances it because, how do you break these racial barriers that are largely products of white supremacy? It's by inclusivity. So I don't even really see a centrist program to fix these problems. And that's the big issue that I have, is they don't even have a proposal to evaluate. It's just like a glib statement about Wall Street, but she's not saying, and that's why I'm enacting reparations. There's nothing, there's no second to the part to that sentence.
Well, I will tell you what the way there is, of course, I don't know if I would say centrist, I would say corporatist program, right? And that is, there's a lot of these programs in corporate America. There's a lot of programs that seemingly address race issues, but do nothing for systemic addressment of this.
They're not. Yeah.
Well, right. I just draw my, I quote Professor Adolph Reed from the University of Pennsylvania, and he says, Martin Luther King didn't march so that Cory Booker could, get hired at, Merrill Lynch after he leaves the Senate.
I understand.
That's like a ridiculous state. If that's what you believe, racial justice is, you're insane.
Well,
it's about the fact that we didn't build housing for African Americans for 50 years. That's
Right.
That has to be changed, and the only way to change that is to build housing for people. There's no way around that.
I agree. Appreciate the call.
All right, Sam. Bye-bye.
George and Saul, done. Secret Deals That Are Changing Our World by Jacques Peretti is up on Audible. Fascinating book to tell the story of secret deals that are changing the world and revolutionizing everything we do, including money, the food we eat, that we buy, the drugs we take. Could be a good guest. We will look into that. Do we have him on the list?
I don't think so, but I'll check.
Also, Kelly, when you leave, you should write an open letter saying that you're leaving the Majority Report to start phase 2 of the Left is Best agenda. I love Sarah Palin. It's nice to hear Steve King use the updated 2017 white man's burden argument. A lot of Republican voters used to see the same argument about slavery. Like, yes, fine, slavery was bad, but black people are better off today because of it. Who's in a worse spot on this DACA thing? The Democrats are going to want to compromise so much because they believe helping people that Republicans could put whatever extra stuff they want in a bill. And the Republicans are only good at fighting. If they sign something short of deporting the other 12 million people, Rush and Hannity might call for their seats. I mean, look, personally, from my perspective, if we got to pretend like we're building a wall to allow for, to get a legitimate DREAM Act passed, I'm all for it. I mean, it really is the functional equivalent of like, we're going to spend X amount of dollars on these 5 corporations, probably 2 of them owned by Rudy Giuliani, to dig a hole in the ground and then fill it back up. And if that's what we got to do, that's what we got to do. Fallout 60, you guys missed the end of that clip. He claims left-wing activists stabbed 2 guys on a death to a train in Oregon. What?
That Gorka clip.
Holy cow.
He tried, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I guess we did. Also, it has that ad with that like 65-year-old guy who's got the better abs than I will ever have.
And you will ever have.
Larry Craig. Any Majority Report listener who would like to tug on my political tool can find me in the 3rd stall of Common Cars B men's room at MSMP every Tuesday afternoon. Come on, come churn my cream. Nice. Lefter, it's great to hear you're not writing off white voters. Prioritizing workers' issues over identity politics is a win for Dems.
I don't like that framing.
I don't
I think
either.
that there's also the other thing too that is important about this debate is that there's dumb versions of both of these arguments. Like there's, like H.A. Goodman versus Amani Ghani is what we're being subjected to. And what we need to have is an argument between Adolph Reed and Kimberly Crenshaw Williams. And then if we have that, I'm more on the Reed side, but both of those positions have a lot of validity, and particularly for just framing it in general to say like, hey, serious economic justice enhances and is vital for any type of serious civil rights and social justice agenda is better than just say like, yeah, fuck identity politics. I mean, that's just not a good way of framing it.
I would also recommend you listen to last Friday's interview I did with Robin Kelly.
Yes.
Because you want to talk about identity politics. The problem with white workers, broadly speaking, is they are practicing identity politics. The white identity politics in a lot of instances. And I can't convince them not to practice that. But if you can, good luck. But there is all the evidence in the world that to the extent that things have been curbed from being universal in this country, it has been to exclude black and brown people and women. I mean, listen to last week's interviews.
That's absolutely
we have a multitude of examples of this. There has never been a program in this country particularly affecting the blue-collar working class, that has excluded white workers. That has been a program that excludes. I mean, I suppose you could say like, well, there's some federal programs that make sure that we get minority bids. Not necessarily anything that would implicate the white working class per se.
Well, it might not even implicate the black working. Or,
right.
I mean, that's usually pretty friendly to people who already have some capital.
I'm just trying to I'm racking my brain here.
No, it isn't. I think the only balance with that is it's completely true that historically the reason those alliances haven't happened is because of white supremacy and lack of white identity politics. It shouldn't be deployed, though, as the universal reason to not attempt to go for those alliances and programs. That's the balance. And that is where I've heard Adolph Reed push back against that argument by citing other examples of some
I think there's
cross-racial organizing that the Pullman Porters did as an example.
Sure.
So, he would say, don't...
I'm not saying that
yeah,
you
no,
don't
you're
do
not
universal.
saying that. Right. But some people have pulled that out at times like, this has never worked, so therefore we should never do it. And that's the balance of, citing that argument. But the historical example of why is obviously because of white racism.
Right. My point is like the idea of prioritizing workers over identity issues, over identity politics is just wrong. The whole point is that they do not push each other out. Mike Status. Is it wrong to get rid of the Red Cross or defund them because of screw-ups they have before? Well, I don't know if you would get rid of the Red Cross necessarily, but I wouldn't fund them.
Bye. Fuck you forever.
Gorka Mustang. This jackass shows up a dealer with a sack full of Mercer money in midlife crisis, and I'm stuck carting that pompous douchebag around while he honks and whistles at girls. Someone please cut my brake line already. Lek White Genocide. When is Matt going to upload the Gorka Trap anthem and join the TMBS Discord? Just because. Oh, Random Rush.
We
that's
should
a good
actually.
idea.
Could we do that? Could we upload the Danarchy song on YouTube as a standalone? That might be not a bad idea.
Actually, I don't know if I want to do that. I want to put it on Spotify so we can draw people to... well, maybe we can put YouTube second. Let's do it that way. All right, let's listen to... see if I can get some Random Rush going here. Hold on. It's a good idea. 1:28, bottom of the hour. Probably not gonna be on, but let's see. Do you got my board up?
Amnesty.
Okay. All right. It's that time again. Time for Random Rush. You know what that means. It means I listen to Rush Limbaugh for 30 seconds, or for 60 seconds, and I respond in 90. It is now 1:29 p.m. East Coast time. Let's see if he's still talking.
They want the DACA kids in the country, and they want the DACA kids to be aware that they're here because of the government, Republicans and Democrats. They want amnestized illegal aliens, immigrants, to be aware that it's government that has made their life in America possible. They know what their voters want. They've got no doubt about it. That's why when they campaign, they tell you what you want to hear. But there aren't such things as national referenda because we do not have a direct democracy. You're probably right that if it were on the ballot, it would go down to a screeching, flaming defeat. But it isn't.
All right. Well, Rush Limbaugh, I guess, is making the argument and maybe responding to a phone call there. It's tough to tell that DACA as a program, that the DREAM Act is not broadly popular. And all of the polling indicates he's absolutely wrong. Now, in the cloistered, sequestered world of Rush Limbaugh's audience, of course, he's right, because his is a festering cesspool of racism. And it's conceivable that these DACA people, if the DREAM Act was to pass, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, could get the right to vote. But these 800,000 people dispersed across the country, the idea that they would get the right to vote in 10, 20, 30 years is not driving this. It is simply a sense of humanity, which, of course, Rush Limbaugh doesn't. Rush Limbaugh wants young kids to stay in the Dominican Republic so he can have a reason to visit there. So, and that's my 90 seconds.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Speaking of Rush Limbaugh, this is also fascinating. As you know, Hurricane Irma is headed to Florida. It's not clear where at this point, where it's going to, is it going to hit the east coast of Florida? Is it going to hit the west coast? Is it going to diminish? But as it stands as of, well, today and last night, it was a Category 5 storm with winds exceeding 185 miles per hour. It's the strongest storm on Earth so far in 2017. It's one of the strongest ever recorded in the Atlantic. It has already hit islands in the Caribbean. It is headed towards Puerto Rico, which, contrary to the impression you would get if you watched any major news outlets, and certainly if you listen to Rush Limbaugh, is part of the United States. And they're looking at the potential of electricity being out for 6 months. This is a country, this is an island, right? They're not a state. They're not a country. They're just basically a colonized island of over 3 million people. And apparently just not worthy of coverage until it hits the Florida Keys. Meaningful coverage. But the pictures that are coming in now from a couple of these Caribbean islands is pretty devastating. Here is Rush Limbaugh talking about how this is all sort of just hyperinflated. Why? Because he wants to create in his audience's mind, he wants to outline the model of the whole climate change hoax. Here he is.
The reason that I am leery of forecasts this far out, folks,
pause it. Now, note, he says this on Monday, correct? On Monday's show? Or is this on Tuesday's show even? And by that point, maybe he's doing it on that day. On Tuesday. Is that possible? He said this on Tuesday. So this is when it's almost already hit, not quite hit the Caribbean islands. I mean, this thing is going to have impact. And understand, if you've got a hurricane of this size, it's only a couple of days away, to not put everybody on notice is almost criminally negligent. When I got a buddy in Pensacola, and I said, I just looked at the trajectory this morning, and the models are showing it not crossing to the inside of the Gulf and going up there and hitting you guys. So it looks like you might be okay. And his response was, and they understand hurricanes down there. His response was, yeah, so far so good. However, Ivan was also predicted to go north, came into the Gulf, wiping out most of my hometown. fingers crossed. The chances of someone's hometown, and it's already happened in the Caribbean, getting wiped out, it's pretty high. So certainly some of Rush Limbaugh's audience, if they are in any way emboldened to stay put and not take precautions, not listen to the mandatory evacuations of the Florida Keys, for instance, this guy, I mean, I know how he gets away with it, but let's listen.
The reason that I am leery of forecasts this far out, folks, is because I see how the system works. So there is a desire to advance this climate change agenda, and hurricanes are one of the fastest and best ways to do it. You can accomplish a lot just by creating fear and panic. You don't even need the hurricane to hit anywhere. All you need is to create the fear and panic accompanied by talk that climate change is causing hurricanes to become more frequent and bigger and more dangerous, and you create the panic and its mission accomplished, agenda advanced. Now, how do you do this? Well, in a number of ways. Let's take South Florida television, for example. There is a symbiotic relationship between retailers and local media, and it's related to money. It revolves around money. You have major industries and businesses which prosper during times of crisis and panic, such as a hurricane, which could destroy or greatly damage people's homes, and it could interrupt the flow of water and electricity. So what happens?
So you have Rush Limbaugh basically saying that the reason why people are freaking out about a Category 5 hurricane. Now, I don't know if he's claiming that this is made up, that it's really not a Category 5 hurricane, or that meteorologists are fabricating models, or that you can never know. This thing could just totally disappear. I mean, I don't know what it is his audience thinks he's saying here. But he's going at great lengths to try and create a metaphor by, hey, sometimes they say it's going to rain, and it doesn't. And they say it's going to rain because they want to sell umbrellas. Just like they say the planet's warming because they want to sell carbon credits, or Al Gore wants to get a new jet.
You should trust corporations at absolutely all times, except there's this really deep corruption in the capitalist system when it comes to climate science.
Yeah, and he doesn't care that there is some percentage of his audience, and I don't know what the numbers would be, but let's just say it's 10 people who are going to hear and be very skeptical about this. And I'm not going out. I'm not listening to the mandatory evacuation. I'm not going to listen to any of that stuff. And they're going to, maybe they're not going to batten down the hatches in their house. I mean, who knows what it is they're going to do to react to this. And the thing is, he will not pay a price for this. I guarantee you. There is no mechanism. This is the thing that people don't understand. There's no mechanism for a Rush Limbaugh audience rebellion. There isn't. They're older. Radio does not allow you to have that type of feedback and pushback. He's completely sequestered. He screens his calls. There are people who do that in this space, too. I'm not going to take any calls. I'm going to block people on Twitter if I hear any criticism, whatnot. But he's that times 10, right? So he will get no pushback on this. It's incredibly just irresponsible. And it's sadistic. And it's also ironic for a guy who gets money from the NRA, let's say, who to talk about the exploitation of panic, to talk about exploitation of sales. The entire conservative movement is built on that dynamic. The gays are coming. The Muslims are coming. The Jews are going to replace us. They're coming for your guns. I mean, that's his entire, every dollar he's ever made. You better get gold. The hyperinflation is coming. I mean, every dollar he's probably ever made in his life is somehow tied towards creating fear in people.
Yes.
And exploiting the fear of people.
I just had an image of Jeff Sessions when you said that, being like, oh, yeah, the next president is going to need to be a lot more racist than Donald Trump. If you feel the way I did about race, and you see that little Jewish bastard with that beautiful girl, and you a president who does not give his daughter to a Jew.
We're going to need
Jew
someone
will not replace
us.
Oh, a lot more racist than Donald Trump.
Let's not go very far for the next example of the right wing using completely unfounded fears to make a buck.
Okay.
Here is Alex Jones and Roger Stone, close confidant of the president, maybe not so much anymore. It's hard to say. It sounds to me like John Kelly has got a phone block or is blocking certain apps on Trump's phone to speak to Roger Stone. But here they are. They're talking about the death march that is taking place.
Joining us is Roger Stone with breaking news on the isolation of the president, the open push for coup d'etat, the launch of his own, a media system called Real News that has the media freaking out. Roger Stone.
Alex, great to be with you. I'm still trying to digest everything we talked about last week, but I am convinced that the three generals who now are in the top circle around the president are seeking to isolate him totally. It's a kind of a death march to walk him towards the ultimate execution by Robert Mueller. The president is probably relieved that the chaos that existed under Reince Priebus of the Oval Office being an open door, kind of like the Marx Brothers stateroom scene. I can understand why the president would be relieved, but now we are at a juncture where they seek to cut off old friends, political allies, friends from business, friends from the world of finance, friends from the president's past, and people that he talks to. They are really seeking to tighten the cordon. And
by the way, after you reported this last Friday, Kelly was in the news that evening saying, I control everyone that gets to see him, even his family. Let's discuss what this isolation means straight ahead, because if they bring Trump down, folks, they're going after everybody. Understand, they know we're winning. Culturally, they want to bring in authoritarianism. Let's talk about how we stop them straight ahead.
Good thing the right wing never exploits any type of made-up fears. Wow.
Oh, a lot more racist. You see that little Jewish bastard in the meeting with me talking about DACA.
Oh, this happened over the course of the break. This video came out. Cobb County. Where's that, in Georgia? And a now former Cobb County officer, as soon as this video came out about a week ago, this is a video from a DUI traffic stop in July 2016. And this former Cobb County officer, Lieutenant Greg Abbott, was asked to resign and then quit after this video came out. He had pulled over a woman for drunk driving, and he was asking her, I guess, to get out of the phone or to pick up her phone or to get out of the car or something like that. And she's getting worried. And so he's trying to make her feel at ease. And listen to how this white police officer tries to make this white woman feel at ease.
No. I can't call them if you don't open the door. Why can't you? Because I will not put my...
Use your phone. It's in your lap right there.
I just don't want to put my hands down. I'm really sorry. I'm just...
You're just really wrong.
No. I've just been way too many videos of problems.
But you're not black. Remember, we only kill black people. Yeah, we only kill black people, right? All the videos you've seen, have you seen any white people get killed? You have.
So he's telling her, like, I'm taking you away. You get to place a phone call. And she says, I don't want to touch my phone. He goes, it's right there in your lap. And she's like, I don't want to reach for it because I don't want you to shoot me. And he goes, come on. We only kill black people. Haven't you seen the videos? We only kill black people. And he's obviously making a joke. But it is a joke that's supposed to put her at ease. Like the one thing that we share, look, I may arrest you, but we're on the same side, right? We can share in our shared racism and laughing at the idea of how it's just black people getting killed. That's what makes it even almost in some ways more disturbing. It's like the reverse of that Eddie Murphy sketch on Saturday Night Live where
Mr. White,
where he got into white makeup and then, get on a bus and find out, like, when you're white, nobody has to pay. It's just like the opposite of that. Like, hey, come on. I'm going to put you at ease by making a joke about how it's just black people shot.
Jokes often contain a kernel of the truth, too, even when...
It just so happens, in that case, that it is... I think it would have been more... If you wanted to really hit on the nose and be like, come on. Statistically speaking, you're much more likely not to get shot because you're white. But it was more like, let me bond with you over our racial resentment. Unbelievable. And not a...
It wasn't even racial resentment. It was just like, hey, you know how it is. Just kill black people. It's fine.
I think the idea is this is sort of like,
just pure shared identity. It wasn't even resentment. I mean, whatever. I mean, it's this distinction without difference, but it was I mean, it was so like lackadaisical. It's just
I think that's what it was. It's just like, look, we're here, you and me. We're here.
You're not getting shot. Look in the rear view if you can lift your head up after all the drinking. Don't worry.
Not a stellar week for law officers in video last week. So on July 26, a detective, Jeff Payne, went in, and the backstory on this, look, I've seen this reported in a couple of different ways. But the facts are that this detective goes into a hospital. It's in Colorado, I believe, right? Utah. The police officer was involved in a high-speed chase. The person he was chasing got into an accident as a function of that high-speed chase. The perpetrator, or the alleged perpetrator, died in that car accident. The other person, the victim, a truck driver, I'm not sure how big the truck was in the hospital. The cop was coming in and wanted the blood sample of the person who was in the truck, not involved in the high-speed chase. The speculation I've seen is that the high-speed chase was contrary to this police officer's department's policy. You don't engage in a high-speed chase in this environment. Too dangerous. And I have read analysis by a defense lawyer, so this is speculative, that the police officer was hoping to find in the blood of the person whose truck was hit and is in the hospital seriously injured some type of substance that would suggest that the accident happened not as a function of this unauthorized high-speed chase, but rather as a function of the truck drivers, ingesting contraband and driving erratically. So the nurse is not authorized to give the blood sample of this and is on the phone with an administrator, and this is how the cop reacts.
If you have an electronic warrant, patient consent, or patient under arrest, and neither of those things, the patient can't consent. He's told me repeatedly that he doesn't have a warrant.
Pause it. Now, 1 second. So what is going on is the nurse is talking both to the police officer and to a hospital official on the phone. So she's basically addressing both simultaneously.
Have a warrant, and the patient is not under arrest. So I'm just trying to do what I'm supposed to do. That's all. So.
Okay, so I take it without those in place, I'm not going to get blood. Is that? Am I fair to surmise that?
Alex, you're not ready. Why are you blaming the messenger, sir?
She's the one that has told me no.
Yeah, but sir, you're making a huge mistake right now.
Okay.
Like you're making a huge mistake because you're threatening a nurse.
Okay. No, we're done. We're done. You're under arrest. We're going. We're done. Said we're done. Said we're done.
Hey. Stop! I said nothing wrong! I have
Okay, she can sit in my car while they're coming.
This is unnecessary, man.
You're right.
This is my department. And this is completely unnecessary.
Completely
unnecessary.
She's under arrest.
That's fine, but it doesn't have
For
to be
doing
like
her
this.
job? This is crazy!
That's fine, but it doesn't have to be like this.
Hey. Why is he so angry? Please, sir, you're hurting me.
Then walk.
No, I have no reason to walk. Stop! You're hurting me and assaulting me. Please, I can't believe it. What is happening? Brad, what is going on?
So that is the body camera of the cop who is out of control. He puts her in his car for about 20 minutes or so, and then she's released without charges because, of course, she's just following the law. So there it is. I think that cop is now on administrative leave. Unbelievable.
The sound in his voice when he says, "Am I fair to surmise that?"
Right.
He sounds so keyed up, and
it's important that we allow the police departments to regulate themselves.
Did you see that young lady disrespecting the police officer who needed the blood sample? Now, people will say that I always make everything a racial issue.
Right.
But in her case, there was a fair-skinned woman whose skin had not been stained by the blood of Abel, and she needed to be cuffed as well. I think you'll find them pretty fair-minded, you
Equal
four-eyed
opportunity
Jew.
abuser.
Equal opportunity abuser.
Calling from a 267 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey guys, this is Fran from Philadelphia.
What's on? What's happening?
I just wanted to say you guys are. I love all the stuff you were talking about today. All the things that are on my mind, particularly about getting at the why behind why things are being done regarding immigration rationalizations. Oh, these are good people, or the climate change stuff. And the more important thing is to get at why are we not doing the more radical alternative? We're not doing radically saying even if these are rapists, we have rapists too. These are people,
right.
With the refugee crisis and all that, people are not, they have to rationalize their, oh, these are good people too. Anyhow, that's two things I wanted to say really about monopolies and this election debate between John and Mike. The first thing about monopolies I wanted to say is the key, I feel like something that's often missed is key on the antitrust law thinking that we have to be aware of is the rationale that we're using to be making, implementing antitrust law or designing new antitrust law. And I don't have a good answer for that, except that I would submit to you that it's got to be some principle of democratic control of affected communities for a given corporation. Namely, my concern is I don't want some type of futuristic worker-owned co-op that becomes a monopoly that can somehow be dismantled by free market fundamentalists just on the basis of antitrust. You might say that's not a problem if we can actually get widespread worker co-ops. We're not there yet, and we can just deal with that once we see it. But I would argue that our view of monopoly does actually interact with our view of the state, and I believe that there are problems that require mass scale action that can't be achieved by groups of entities that can't match the scale of the problem. There's got to be this connection between the scale of the problem and the scale of the approach, right?
No, well, yes. And let me just say this, though. First off, we have the laws are on the books. It is really whether or not you decide to apply the measure that Brandeis established and promulgated in the 1930s, or the one that Robert Bork championed in the early 1980s. There are those like Galbraith is sometimes, Kenneth Galbraith is sometimes cited as someone who was pro-monopoly, and I think that's an overstatement of where he was. But he took the position that sometimes monopolies are necessary, but more along the lines of what you're talking about, but not necessarily private monopolies either. I mean, I see what you're saying. Right. You don't want these antitrust laws to be applied to the concept of, like, I don't know, nationalized health care, right? Or something to that effect.
Exactly.
I understand what you're saying. I think we're a long way off, and certainly statutorily. I mean, if that argument was being deployed by the right, first of all, they're already doing that, right? You hear libertarians saying, like, we don't want a monopoly of power by the state.
Wait, I have a question about this, but let me make my other point.
The measures of what is problematic are ones where it is inhibiting freedom in some respect. Now, off the top of my head, I don't know. I can't contemplate that workers' co-op you're talking about in what industry that would be, that it would in some way be anti-democratic, or
well, just that the one if it so happened that and I'll just finish with this piece and ask about the political debate, the election debate rather. But if there were to be a statewide company, let's say you just take, I don't know, some like liberal state in which, maybe you could get some type of co-op democratic capitalist model to adhere, or democratic corporatist model to adhere, I should say. You could have a very democratic organization that could, I mean, this is obvious. You got the point. That
I think there's always the potential of unintended consequences, but I think we're far enough away from that potential to worry about it. I mean, it just reminds me of a piece. I remember a guy in the Atlantic, I think Josh Green it was, wrote about people should be careful about Air America. We don't want what happened to the left to what happened to the right with Rush Limbaugh. And that piece was written 15 years ago. So I get your point, but that would be the least of my worries at this juncture. But
the last distinction there, though, is one of the law. And I mean, I would agree to you that we shouldn't be like, oh, if we're going to culturally accept this, what are the implications.
You don't need
But, I
any
mean, when it
changes
comes
in
to
the law. You don't need any
when
changes in the
when
law
it comes
right
to
now.
right.
You don't.
I mean, when it comes to the law, you put words and they can be taken, later
Yes.
on used against you.
I understand.
The
Quick
thing-
on the other point. Quick.
Mike and John. Yep. That's got to happen. It's so good. I love it.
Oh,
when
anytime,
other guys
anywhere,
call in.
any place. I'll fucking lay you out. I'll lay Bob. You're from Philly too. I'll fucking smack your face.
The thing I hope. the
Just
thing I
name,
hope
just
you guys
name
do
the
is
location. All
visual
sorts of
aid.
talk, but no scheduling. I'm ready. I'm coming for all of
visual
you.
Is make sure that if you're going to have that debate, I know people who are listening on the podcast are not going to benefit from that necessarily, but just to be able to tease out why they're making the arguments they're making visually, and my because my main concern is that why do we make assumptions we do about election models? Nate Silver's this great pitfall example. There's a guy, Yanir Bar-Yam, who wrote an article. He's from the New England Complex Systems Institute, a fascinating thinker. And his whole problem with statistical thinking is actually it can sometimes be a step back from mere heuristic thinking, in the sense
New
that
England.
when you do statistical thinking, you do independent assumptions of independent variables. In the sense that
do me a favor.
This happens. That doesn't change the probability.
Listen,
you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I gotta jump. But do me a favor. Send
Do
us
it.
an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com with the debate in the headline in the subject, and send me the name of what you're talking about and some literature I can read about that and what the question be. And we're going to do this debate. We will
Oh
get
yeah,
it
anytime.
together.
You want me to
All right, thanks for
humiliate
the call.
Mike the way I humiliate you at least about 2 or 3
All right.
times a week on a statistical average?
One more call, and that's all we got time for. You're calling from a 925 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
DJ from San Francisco.
What's up, DJ? What's on your mind?
Hello.
Got to be quick.
Oh, okay, so they see the market concentration of the U.S. economy. You were talking about Amazon, Facebook, and Google.
Yeah.
Well, the U.S. economy, those are like elements in the decline of workers, in national income, the rise in inequality, the decrease in business startups, and the death of job creation and fall of research and development spending. These companies are monopolies. I agree with you.
Great. I appreciate the call. Listen to those interviews if you haven't listened to them. Sabeel
All right.
Rahman, Barry Lynn, Matt Stoller, Lena Khan, all important on that topic. Appreciate the call.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Out of time for the phone. Let's go to a couple of IMs. Angry. Could you do shows on the job guarantee, or have you done so already? We did do one on the job guarantee, right? Didn't we? Not that long ago. About a month or two ago. Maybe 3 months ago. Just found out Kelly's leaving. No! Much love. DX Fool. Hello, cisgender Caucasian men, and welcome back. Wonder if you'll be attending the Cinderblock Comedy Festival in Brooklyn this week. It's being headlined by Judy Gold and Janine Garofalo. Features rising star Riley Silverman, who's related to Sarah. You should check it out. I don't know, maybe I will. Launch Air Media. Pence is meeting with McCain. Possibly Pence's VP pick? I don't know. Cool J146, you were saying that these anti-DACA people, that's healthcare. Yeah, that's definitely healthcare, are operating solely from racism and xenophobia. I agree that the hate and ignorance seems too deeply ingrained to sway them with any rational arguments. What do we do? Just ignore them, try to expand voting rights and expand our base? Yes. And hope the next generation is less ignorant? Yes. But I would also put pressure on, a couple of Republicans to break off. Hypersville Milk. Tell Ronald Reagan there's something wrong with his podcast. I tried 3 devices in 2 different Wi-Fi networks and couldn't get it to play on any of them. Matt, do you have a Goodreads page? I'd like to pick through your reading list.
I do have a Goodreads page. I don't know how to send people to it.
You know what we're going to do? When we get the About page on the new website, which is coming soon, that's where you'll put that stuff.
Okay.
Nathan Ray, I can't believe on a news show you missed the biggest story. Netflix dropped a trailer for a new season of Magic School Bus, which in my opinion is even more educational, more fun than Wildcrats. Will you be watching? I might. I have a friend who did Magic School Bus. I do like that, but Saul
love that show.
loves Wildcrats. But Mila still knows how rain is made from that. Remember the good old days when a big concern was whether Podesta was going to disclose evidence of aliens when Clinton won? Bernie or bust? Stein 2020, left his best. Or Goodman 2020.
I always thought that
Says
was a
Chicago
play
Dawn.
to get like the deplorables.
Joseph Ballin, aren't you a bit concerned that this hurricane relief to Texas is utterly pointless if we don't do anything to stop climate change? No, because I feel proud of myself for voting for the candidate with a new Green Deal. Aren't you worried that the UN came out with a report, Joseph Ballin? We didn't get to this today, but Syrian forces have used chemical weapons more than 24 times during the country's civil war, including a deadly attack that led to U.S. airstrikes on the government planes, UN war crimes investigators said on Wednesday. Do you want to write me back to tell me about how the neocons have infiltrated the UN war crimes?
You know what's cool about Joseph Ballin is he's like, yes, I would. I'll take you up on that.
In the most conclusive findings to date from investigations into chemical weapons during the conflict, the UN Commission of Inquiry on Syria said a government warplane dropped sarin on Khan Sheikhoun in Idlib province in April, killing more than 80 civilians. I'll wait for the video on that. They have no zoning laws in Houston. You can build anywhere. If they rebuild, it's going to be the same thing happen in a couple of worlds, but nobody wants to talk about that. No, I agree. Sustainability is a huge issue. Nick the Liberal. Guess what is not going to happen? Anything while we have a Republican Congress and Republican thing. But if you want to wait until that third party builds up enough national steam to tackle this, then that sounds like a plan to me. A bad one, super bad plan. Stupid and dumb bad plan. With regard to your commentary today, August 2017 edition of The Atlantic had an article by Franklin Foer discussing a long-standing Democratic division pitting social versus economic issues. Cory Booker was featured as the embodiment of the Clinton wing. The article wrapped up by saying Dems will continue to lose until Blair's hostility at policies which favor the rich. Interesting. Oh, look at that one. Maybe we write that down? Just make a note? Yeah, in The Atlantic. I see that many faith leaders have come out against ending DACA, says Teacher BBN. I feel that we need to make a moral argument. You cannot make anything, you cannot be a good anything Buddhist, Christian, humanist, and support this action. Play the religion card. The right is quick enough to do it when it suits them. I got no problem with that either. Grilling with Gorka. Greetings, pajama boys. Check out my curated collection of gifts at your local Spirit Halloween store. All right, 5 more of these guys, and then we're out of here. Denver Dave, setting aside the generic ballot argument between Mike and John, I'd like to know whose mother right-wing Mandela prefers.
I mean, he'll decide based on the winner of the debate.
Because I watched the debate with eager anticipation.
Jorge the Bad Hombre. Sam, an apology from Michael. Yesterday I made a joke about listening to Reagan's podcast and the BS show too. I heard a groan and a moan in the background with an F-bomb. Sorry if I hurt your feelings. I actually like your show very much. Oh, that's so sweet of you. That was so nice.
Nice. Verified.
Also, yesterday I tried watching TYT. Couldn't listen for long. Kelly, good luck. MR will miss you, but TYT needs help. Urolosis. Many in the scientific... Hi, Rachel. I've noticed that when you reference racism, it's frequently followed by or associated with the word misogyny as well. While both evils may share some common threads, their historical evolutions are significantly different, particularly outside the well-cultured civil societies, the Anglo-Saxon world, which the senator so eloquently described earlier in your show. I realize that you have been heavily influenced by Kelly, HRC, and Maddow, but maybe sexism links more aptly to racism. Try it and see how it feels. Many in the scientific community with very specific training in weather systems and related fields believe that we have crested the tipping point as regards to ongoing climate disaster. So it's unclear to me from a rational point of view how anyone can claim hoax. Well, yes.
From irrational.
Teacher Lauren. Hi, everyone. I started grad school last week, getting my degree in elementary special ed. So far, please, you got it. Good luck. Also, fuck Steve King forever. Danny, dear Kelly, wishing you the best of success in your future career. Enjoyed your voice on the show. Billy Buckner, Just want to ask, is there a Boston team that doesn't cheat? Seriously, Apple Watches? What the fuck? Quit cheating, you bastards. You know what? Fake news. Fake news. You don't know the Red Sox? We're stealing. We're supposedly stealing, and it appears they were stealing catcher signals to the...
You put the iPhone watch against it, dude, and then we'll know the signals.
Look,
it's going to be a curveball.
This is what happens.
Steve fucking Jobs.
It's not supposed to. It's okay to do it supposedly if you don't have any technical help, but the fact is the matter, and everybody knows this is a dirty secret, that the Yes Channel uses a specific camera to steal for the Yankees, steal the signs, and then they just call it in. At least the Sox had the wherewithal to use an Apple phone so they could text each other and look at the phone like this to find out what the signal was. Calvin BW, who was the Amazon interview with? Only heard that it was from 2014. Lena Khan. Two more. Trump's got to make a buck. Don't be afraid of new capital investment costs. Thanks to Fuhrer Trump, you're in a great position to write all the purchases off as well as any losses. This brings me to my actual point. If Dems go after the thing in the tax cut debate, it should be to go after LLCs. If money's bullets, then LLCs would be the clips. It's how they do inversions as well, being the foundational piece or a contribution to corporate personal tax evasion. Thanks and stay sweet, MR Beauties. And the final I am of the day. Ronald Reagan. Thanks for the promotion for my Facebook Live event yesterday. We robbed Michael of at least 3 listeners. Wahaha. Seriously, though, my podcast sucks. Please no cross-promoting. Everyone sign up for TMBS.
What? No, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, look.
I wonder if he wait. I'm going to just check and see if he did another one after
I hope he's
that,
doing a
saying,
joke.
Joking.
No, Redirect is legitimately a very good podcast. Really.
All right, folks.
I rely on it.
See you.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the man